Right, hi. This is the Lunar Poetry Podcast, and today we're in Stockholm, in Sweden. My name is David Turner, and today I'm joined by Olivia Bergdahl, Tswi Hlakotsa, and Niklas Mesaros. And all of those names will be written properly in English on the website. Please don't trust my Swedish or any kind of pronunciation. We're going to start just with a short intro from each of the poets. Just a quick thing, not all of the poets here today are from Stockholm. Well, only one is, in fact, but they're all involved in the Stockholm scene. So that's predominantly what we're going to talk about today. But I will let them introduce themselves now. So first, Olivia.
Yes, and I'm the one not in Stockholm.
Yeah.
I work as a performance poet or a spoken word artist, and I'm from Gothenburg in Sweden. Now I live in Malmö, but I know mostly about the Gothenburg scene. And I won the Nationals in Sweden in 2007. And
so the Nationals, that's the slam competition?
Yeah, exactly,
yes, right.
The Poetry Slam. And then the year after that, I was in the World Cup of Poetry Slam, and then I got the 4th place.
Okay.
I think that's my most... my best titles.
Yeah.
And I also do a lot of writing things and workshops, and I have written 1.5 book because the second one is almost finished,
okay.
But the first one is. So that's my...
Yeah. So, and Tswi?
I am... my real name actually is Motswika.
Okay.
And it's a very difficult name, so hence Tswi, which my mother gave me. It's basically the middle part of my name, and she would always use it when she was happy, and when I was in trouble she used the whole thing, and I would know that serious approach with caution. But yeah, I live in Stockholm. I've been in Stockholm since February. I come from Durban, South Africa. I was born in a place called Matatiele in the Eastern Cape, and I lived in a place called Ep.2 in the Free State. And yeah, that's me.
And you won also. You're the ruling.
Currently, yes. I won the.
Don't be humble, Tswi. Come on, get it out.
Otherwise, I feel a little bit strange.
I won the National Slam Poetry Competition this year in Umeå, and I won the Stockholm Slam Competition also a few months earlier. And yeah, it's been a ride.
Great. And Niklas?
I actually started slamming in Gothenburg. I lived outside Gothenburg, went to a journalist's education, and I found this slam in Gothenburg and just accidentally stumbled upon it and started slamming, and I did pretty well. And I won the Swedish Nationals 2010, and then I entered the competition again in 2012, and I won again. So I'm 2-time Swedish national slam champion, if titles are of any importance.
You told us that they are.
Yeah,
so.
it's not of importance, it's of interest.
It's of interest, yes, of public interest.
Yeah.
And I've been
of disclosure.
I've been performing ever since 2009.
I will make a quick note just to save your embarrassment. I did tell all the poets to mention any competition wins, so they didn't offer that information up voluntarily. I did demand that they embarrass themselves.
Yes.
Okay, but I think maybe that's enough of an introduction. What we'll do is there will be more information about my guests today on the blog and the website, links to their work, anything that's published or anything that's on YouTube. So as many links as possible. So that's why we're not really going to go too much into individual life stories here, and we might just crack on with the discussion now. So I think I'd like you guys to really begin telling us a bit about the spoken word scene in Stockholm, and I think really what I'd like to find out is it predominantly sort of classical poetry based, or more experimental spoken word, or is there a leaning towards slam competitions? And yeah, so that's what style of spoken word do you find in Stockholm?
I would say a I would say mostly. I mean, they're divided into slam. When there's slam seasons and the qualifications are there's a lot of. There's mostly 2 scenes that are in work, and then they're all year round. When it's not slam seasons, it's mainly open mic things, and then there's dominated by spoken word poets. But that's not to say that spoken word poets doesn't pick up a guitar or do singing or but mostly it's the open mic nights are dominated by spoken word poets.
And when you say spoken word poets, is it like poetry slam poets or?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, the scene in Stockholm is pretty incestuous. Because you know all the people who are involved, who are making the arrangements, and usually it's like the ones who are making the arrangements for open mic night. They perform as well on the other when they're switching. So it's mostly. Slam poets doing their thing.
Yeah, and Sweden, because you're sort of the most recent into Sweden, and then went to Stockholm. When you first started performing, did you feel like you had to perform in a particular style, or did you feel like you were being pushed more towards doing slam in order to get to know people, or was it?
I think for me it was easy because I figured first impressions are very important, so first impressions of me has to be me, and I think my whole life I have always gravitated towards slam, even though at one point I didn't know what slam was, but that's what I was doing. So when I came here I just did what I did, and then started sort of defining it a little bit more and getting in contact with people that are slam poetry conscious. But yeah, I just did me. I just rocked up and I was like, okay.
It wasn't so much. I wasn't really asking whether you felt like you needed to change your style as such. It's just more, just how you found the scene represented itself to you in terms of what you felt. I might be leading the question a bit with some preconceptions. I think because what. My view is, if you're doing slam, you're doing it to win, and there are certain ways to win a slam, really. Or whether my idea more of open mic spoken word can be more experimental, and you're freer to try.
I see what you're
perhaps,
saying.
But I would also say that, because I've been to and met some British poets, and it feels like the British scene is more. It's like the Swedish scene in a lot of ways are the opposite of it, because it's so much about the poetry slams in Sweden. Even though you're not really into the competition, but the scene is the poetry slams. And then in Britain it's more like the poetry slam is just something that happens after.
I think I'd agree with you there. It's I think that's maybe why I'm asking the question, because in London there feels like a divide. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't cross that divide, but you definitely have slam poets, and that's why I keep sort of differentiating really between slam poets and spoken word artists. And I might be using those terms wrong, and there will be a lot of people that disagree with me, but that's the difference that I mean. It's I sort of get the impression from talking to a lot of people over here that you're not a slam poet or a spoken word artist. You could just do any of them.
I think what's happening now is, the scene in itself has been pretty marginalized in as a cultural phenomena in Sweden. A lot of people don't know what poetry slam or spoken word is. So, but now what's happening, as I can see it, is that a lot of people who are doing slams are also becoming more interested in doing other things on stage and using what they are doing in their, as a slam poet, and drawing from that is doing other things on stage that are similar to a slam poem, but has other poetic qualities to it.
Would any of you guys have a view on where you'd like the scene to go in the future? Do you think it's and this, I have no judgment, I don't know enough about it, but do you think it's travelling in a healthy direction? Do you think it's growing, or do you think things could be done differently to encourage new performers to come along?
It can always be done differently, and I think it's always a problem, and it's also natural that you are grouping yourself into, and it's like for the poetry slam poets and the spoken word artists, which are the same mostly in Sweden. They are in like one group, and then you have the intellectual and paper writing poets in another group, and it's like, and I think it's natural in some way, and then also it would be fun to connect them more, of course.
Yeah, I mean, as, you know, I've had always a problem with disconnecting myself from what's happening with the scene and myself, because I see myself as a huge part of the scene, which is a really narcissistic way of viewing oneself. But I don't know if it's me growing or if the scene is changing, but I do feel like it's growing. And I would love to see it, you know, being TV aired, like national slam competitions, and I would love to see spoken word poetry having a bigger place in, you know, in media or whatever.
Right, so my next question is, why do you guys perform, and why do you choose spoken word?
Okay, I perform because it feels like it's the next step, you know. Like A, getting a poem, B, writing it down, and C, you know, sharing it. You know, for me, it's more sharing than anything. And I like spoken word because there's a lot of things I can do with spoken word. And for example, there's things that I can do with spoken word that I can't do with music. I can, and I mean vice versa also. But for me, I feel like spoken word is really a strong way of communicating my ideas. Because reading a book is one thing, but then having the author read you the book, you sort of get a different picture. So for me, I suppose, it comes natural. Just the next step.
Do you have anything? If you don't have anything,
I can just agree on that.
Well, I have a follow-up question then to that as well. So, when performing, how do you view your relationship as a performer with the audience? And by that I mean, the way I often frame the question with people: do you just see the audience as a pure necessity? For instance, if they weren't there buying tickets and drinks, there would be no venue available for you to read in, so the scene wouldn't exist. Or do they actually? Are you trying to connect with them? You know, are they important for your performance?
Yes,
they are. Really. And in what way?
And I think it's like I have this thinking about performers, that you can see the audience as a friend or as an enemy, and you can impress on the audience, or you can like trying to get them into your performance in some way. And I'm really on the part like I really like the audience, and I love when they are a part of the performance. And it's also like performing is a little bit to just this thing with communication and to reach out for people, and then you get something back, and I really like that communication between the audience and the performer.
I totally agree on that as well. I mean, I love the response thing, you know, and I love the performing bit of it. Like, I really love the acting out of, you know, embodying your words and find the physicality in your poems, and just have that connection when you find the response you want and people are laughing and crying at the same time, and it's like, I love that interaction. So the audience is a pure necessity for...
and so that leads me on to another smaller question. Do you find yourself improvising or changing your performance style based on the reaction of a particular audience? Because it's just from my experience, different sized audiences, different venues, you get a different. I've found different reactions sometimes.
Sometimes, but it's also I never change the text.
No, not suggesting the text so much, but
sometimes when I feel that they are not really with me, I try to reach out and, and maybe say something in the middle of the poem or.
Yeah, you can definitely alternate. I mean, pauses and stuff like that. If you feel like you need to hook them in a way that you feel like they're not really there.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm terrible at improvisation. So I usually, always come back to my idea of what I'm doing. But sometimes you really have to work a crowd because they are hard stone faces, giving away anything. It's like, are they enjoying it or they're hating it? And
especially Swedish people, like you guys.
This is true.
Swedish grown-ups just sit there and they look at you, and like I remember the one time I went to a wedding in the south somewhere, and these girls came on and they started singing, and I'm at the back. Thank goodness I was at the back. Because I'm at the back thinking, yay, this is brilliant. I'm like, I want to jump and shout something, And then I look around and these people are very serious. And I'm like, okay, so this is how we are in Rome now. Yeah. So we must do as the Romans do. And then when the girls were finished, like the applause was so loud, you know. And I realized that it's different crowds, and it has always been very important for me to be able to understand a crowd. Very recently, I think I had one of the worst gigs of my life. like I had the toughest crowd I have ever had in my whole life, and I have had some pretty hectic crowds. But this particular crowd was on another level. I walk into this place and there's like tables and chairs and people sipping on coffee and whatnot. And in the back of the room...
This was in Sweden.
This is in Sweden. There's this little section with pillows on the floor and a mat, like it's a chill spot. And there's about 25 to 30 kids in a room almost as big as this. And they are as loud as kids can get. It's a Friday night. They just got back from school. The parents are tired. And they are not about to sit down for a good 15 minutes and listen to somebody talk. Even when the MC was introducing the evening and what it was so rowdy. And I thought to myself, my goodness, this is bad. Got up, and thank goodness I had 2 sets that day. We decided on the way there that I would do 2 instead of 1. During the first set, it was a disaster. Imagine trying to be serious and talk about very difficult issues. The parents, their faces are just distant because they are concerned about their kids being noisy, and the kids don't really care. And here you are trying to shout louder than the kids, and it's just... volume the kids. That's always great. It was madness. And afterwards, I thought to myself, you know what? It's either I'm going to die here tonight or I'm going to get them to join me. Because I can't kill them.
No.
So what I did was I decided to invite all the kids to stage. I was like, okay, come. And I mean, my Swedish is very broken. So that was quite funny. I called them all up on stage and we decided to make a beat. And while they made a beat, I did something with the beat. So I learned a lot that day because I realized that, some venues, especially with the performance part, the most important thing is being able to understand the demands of a particular venue and a particular crowd of people. A lot of people get it wrong where they are overpowered by nerves and don't really allow themselves to sort of break out of the norm and really experiment. Sure. And I feel like as an artist, for you to grow, you need these different scenarios to sort of prepare you for the future, because that's what soldiers do. Soldiers go through different protocols to condition them and to make them ready for particular situations that might come up.
It's funny to think about poetry reading as military training.
Yeah.
After that day, I had to.
Every gig is an exercise, and then.
Well, I suppose some audiences might feel that poetry has invaded their space and would rather have
Especially kids.
Who the fuck are you?
So it might.
Funny thing. Sorry. Funny thing. Like, imagine I'm talking about, like, one of the pieces that I did was talking about, wars and how people use child soldiers in conflicts and like very serious stuff. In the middle of that, a kid gets up and starts dancing. Imagine it's this rowdy room. You're trying to be serious. This is what you're trying to share, and somebody decides, no, right now I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna dance.
I'm gonna bust a move right in your power.
Oh my goodness, it was a disaster.
That's some funky poems you got there.
I wanted to show him some funk. But
So just quickly, I mean, probably given your opinions really, but I wasn't going to talk too much about myself, but I improvise a lot when I'm on stage, and if I'm honest, it sort of comes from not wanting to remember the lines, so that's why I improvise. But most of it comes from the performing I do is much more about feeling than the text itself. I mean, I hope that the writing is good, but do you feel like improvisation is a tiny part of the performance scene in Sweden? Do you think it's all quite tight? It's all very...
No. We have competition in improvisation during the national symposium. But I also think like there is different kinds of improvisation on stage, because I never improvise the text, but I always improvise if there is something happening or there's someone shouting something, or like you did with the kids. That's one kind of improvisation. But I think that some poets are really good in improvisation, and they have this like text going on in their head, so they can just use it, and others need to write it down and learn it by heart. Jag älskar genier. Deras fyndiga skriverier, genomtänkta komedier, tragedier, ödesymfonier, konstnärskolonier, Bergman och von Trier. Jag älskar konstnärskap i enorma halter, fadersgestalter som sällan lägger hatten på hyllan. Och så Dylan, min älskade Dylan. Säga att de inte gillar gulliga små hiphop-killar, och helt ärligt så får jag ju en smärre hjärtkatarr varenda gång jag ser en skäggstubbig kille med gitarr som spelar låtar han har skrivit alldeles själv. Jag faller som en fura i en Norrlands älv för fattigmansromantiken, den rödvins osande finlyriken, kedjerökare, självmordsförsökare. Jag älskar svartklädda män, hur de talar om sanningen, för jag älskar filosofer och hobbyprofeter. Och vad är det nu det heter? Jo, estradpoeter. Jag älskar konstnärer och revolutionärer och fotografer. Jag älskar pojkar med svartbågade glasögon på halvtomma biografer som tittar på någon svartvit film av någon rysk regissör. Jag älskar varenda genialisk mästaramatör. Och visst, jag tänker jag vill ha varenda gång jag ser en het poet, även om jag vet att de brukar vara rätt så pretentiösa. Men jag älskar dem ändå. När morgonen kommer och timmarna blir små, även om de har en ovana att citera sig själva då. För jag älskar deras självförtroende och innebördes beundran. Jag älskar deras barnsliga och oförstående undran varför inte alla kan förstå dem. Jag älskar hur lätt och hur svårt det är att nå dem, för jag älskar genier. I mina fantasier ser jag frierier och ingenting gör mig så tillfredsställd och glad som en smäktande kärleksförklaring till en smäktande serenad. Men jag måste ändå kväva mitt fnitter, och med risk för att låta aningen bitter säga konstnärssjälar, jag älskar er, men säg, när kommer ni att älska mig?
So next I'd like to ask you if you see yourselves as performers or writers, and I'm sort of guessing we're going to go around and get three answers which say both, and that's fine. But maybe we can discuss the different sides of an artist in terms of spoken word, and also if we can talk about your influences both on your performance style and your writing style, and whether any of those influences overlap. So maybe you start with Niklas.
Yes, I first and foremost think of myself as a performer, and to be able to perform I need to have something written down, and I always have the room in mind when I'm writing, so I would not necessarily call myself a writer, but the writing part is a necessary evil to be able to perform. And now I'm putting up, I have a producer, I'm going to put up a show, and then I'm writing a full-length 60-minute monologue, which is completely different from what I've been doing up until now, which is spoken word poems that could like lengthwise be around 6, 7, 10 minutes long. And so finding that was really a challenge in to find a rhythm in the writing and more focus on what happens on the desk with the pen and paper or the computer. I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, both.
Yeah. No, I think you've explained. Sort of,
I'm leaning towards performing.
Which way you
who needs to write?
One feeds into the other.
My answer is going to be a little bit different, a little bit deeper, but,
more profound, not so shallow, not so superficial and self-centered.
Yeah, but I consider myself both. Both as well, because writing is where it starts and performing is where it ends. I think if you ask a musician, are you a musician or are you a writer or a performer, it's almost the same thing. And my influences there are so many things that influence. Writing, on the writing side of things, I am influenced by human emotion and human interaction and all the stuff that people go through. And then on the performance side, the challenge is always to take this that is written and extend it. Not only extending it, but complementing it. Putting putting a microphone in front of someone, you know. For me, performance is a way of amplifying everything else, and there's a lot of influences to that as well. I love looking at different areas like military training, for example, which did come up earlier, stuff like that. I love looking at sports psychology. I love especially with the competition element, because world-class athletes have this zone, for example, that they go into just before they go on stage, and do what they do. So for me, it's always interesting to see, okay, how does that guy do it? And you look at Usain Bolt, for example. He's very comical. He's playing around. Like, this guy's about to run 100 meters, and he's playing. Like, my mom would just slap my boy, silly, And then you look at Michael Phelps, for example, and he's just calm and quiet. He's listening to me. So all of those things, for me, I look at it and I'm like, okay, how can I take that and use it? Because there's like Olivia was saying about nerves earlier, how she doesn't get nervous anymore. Sometimes you feel like, what do I need to do? I love nerves. I get worried and very scared if I am about to go up and I am not nervous about anything. Because for me, because my work is so emotionally charged, I feel like I need those nerves. I need that little shots of nervousness to just sort of heighten things a little bit more. So a lot of influences. I consider both very important. It's like in spoken word, it's a mutual relationship. You need both writing and performing. They need each other. You can't say you're a good spoken word artist where you don't sort of come close to finding a balance between the two. So that's my mission, to just sort of find that balance.
And Olivia?
Yeah, it's a lot the same. I consider myself both, but it's more like when I started performing, it felt I had this, like, the first times I was on stage, I was so comfortable and relaxed, and I had this like I think like the stage that you can find this place where it's so quiet in some way and clear, and you can really do things, and I really, really love that place. But for me, everything started in the writing, and so it comes from the writing, and I have been writing as long as I can remember, and that's my natural way of handling things. And then the performing was like, it was like another thing that I hadn't thought about. It was just a coincidence that I went to a poetry slam, and there was not enough people competing, so I was in it, and I was like, okay, this is the thing to combine the thing I do for myself, and in some way making it as a thing for other people, and to be part of something. It's not. I think, and it's also like you said with influences. It's like, I don't really know. It's so many small things that you combine, and as long as you feel something for something, you can write about it, and you can make a performance about it. So just to try to collect all the feelings that surround you, and also see how other people use feelings to do things.
Now, I mean, that question and the three answers pretty much went in the direction that I expected.
So obvious.
No, it's not obvious. I mean, it's just I suppose that's just how things work. But what I'm really interested in, and maybe this might not go anywhere, but maybe if I say from my own point of view, so I'm very much a performer, but I view myself as a writer, because I don't only write the stuff that I perform, I write other things as well, So, and I couldn't get anywhere. I couldn't get on stage. For instance, I can't get up and perform other people's writing. I could only do so. I view myself as a writer, and the performing comes as an extension. I think in terms of, just coming back to the influence, the reason I mention that is because the biggest influences on my performing and I suppose my writing as well, and where it overlaps, is traditional stand-up comedy, where it's one person with a mic controlling an audience. I suppose in a way, really, that's just saying that spoken word influences my spoken word, but I think that's fine as well. But I'm just interested whether you find any influences that really cover both sides for you? I mean, there might not be, but
I think all of them do.
Oh, okay. Sure.
I think it's more like that, because I also write things that I don't perform.
Sure.
I write prose and articles and sometimes, and that kind of writing is, I can't really separate it like in the influence way, because it's okay, there's something that I want to do something about, and then I can do a spoken word piece about it, or I can do some writing about it, and it's. I know that some themes are more likely to be on paper, and others are more likely to be on stage, but I can't really.
No, okay, that's fine.
And it's also with I also like comedians or actors or everyone on stage. I can get influenced by, or musicians, but I can also use that influence into the paper, I guess. So it's very hard to.
Yeah, I watch a lot of film. I love film. I'm a really film nerd. So I've always been interested in finding a nerve or making a scene or a setting that I can use visually. That's both a sort of pre-staged act that I can do with the live. That's really not stringing a sentence together.
No, I think I know. I mean, you do get to a point when you've done a certain amount of performance, then you can then begin to write with a view to perform that, and then you can use film or theatre, or you can use.
I can rewatch a scene and say, and I think, what is it in this scene that really moves me or makes me weep or cry or laugh, and then I try to dissect that. And then if it's the lightning, and then I can use that as a descriptive thing in the narrative, in the poem, and try to find all those elements in a scene that really moved me. And
but I think it's also like where if you want to be, if you really want to be a spoken word artist, then maybe you are listening to spoken word artists and you are writing spoken word. But if you're more in the place where I really need to say something and I don't really know how, but this medium is good for me, and then I use that, and then you don't.
There's a scene in Game of Thrones in season 1, I think, where that little boy was just pushed off.
Bran.
And Nana is telling him a story.
I haven't seen it.
And he's telling him the story of how the White Walkers came for the first time.
Yeah.
I downloaded that scene and I just listened to the audio without the visuals.
Yeah.
And the way that old lady's voice was, it was like watching a paintbrush.
Yeah.
The places and ways in which it cracked when she spoke about certain things, it was like ow.
There is a reason why stars don't shine as bright as they used to. See, they told me that it is all your fault, you see. Because lately, you have been crying yourself to sleep, and for them, it would be a cruel joke to shine while your heart is breaking. And that is why it seemed right in their sight for their light to pale in the night while you weep. Because it makes no sense, like an endless night in the morning's eye. See, though weeping may endure for the night, you will find joy in the morning, side by side with the promise of eternal glory. Why? Because I have conspired with the stars to sprinkle stardust in your dreams every night, reminding you that you are prized by majesty, inspired by true artistry, refined by adversity, and defined by destiny. destiny to remind you that your beauty is yet to outshine the sun, that the power of love inside of your soul is yet to school stars on what it truly means to shine with the kind of power that would send shivers down the spines of lightning bolts with puns that thunder from dark days to light years, surpass pain to fight fears, to spark flames and dry tears, the mind stained with ideas to find faith and blunt spears, molding golden smiles from broken hearts. But you see, love once lived as a poem on a page I saw bleeding in the rain. I watched it wash away my soul. The scene unfolds to dreams untold, clothed in nothing but Proverbs 31. And that is why you will no longer settle for anyone telling you what you can never become, because you are absolutely beautiful, as if your smiles were carved out of an angel's heartbeat from the edge of eternity where the next beat awaits, as if that substance that went into making stars shine was taken from that twinkle in your eyes. Your voices, they sound like sunsets, singing lullabies of soft kitty to a wounded planet. Your laughter, the sound of a healing heart, and your heartbeat, the rhythm of a laughing baby. So child, no matter how much love has broken your heart, love only hurts when it is done wrong. Remember that no matter how much love has broken your heart, love only hurts when we do it wrong.
Okay, so next I'd like to talk to you guys about really this idea of, within poetry or spoken word, are we looking to hide or highlight a particular concept behind that poem? And I mean, this subject might only be of interest to writers with a fine art background, but really I'm asking, do you feel it's your job to show an audience how much work has gone into your poem, or are you trying to make it look effortless? And
Wow.
who wants to start with that?
That's a bit of a pickle. No, I try. Yeah, you were. Oh,
Okay,
you were saying.
No, I think for me, it's
Saved
quite,
by the gasp.
for me it's quite easy, because even though there's a lot of work that goes into it, but the most important thing for me is the outcome it's going to have on the audience.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that is the end to which, the means are based upon.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a lot of work. But the most important thing for me, even though this might betray my philosophy of, not trying to downplay the importance of hard work, but the outcome is more important.
Yeah, but if you have the hard work behind it and people can feel that you have the hard work behind it, I think it's easier to listen to it, actually. Or I can feel that myself if I listen to a poet and the poem, I can feel that, okay, this is a well-worked poem. Then I listen to it more seriously in some way. Otherwise, I'm more listening to the performance, I guess, or the voice or the body of the poet. But I try to be as professional as I can in some way, but also as Tswi is saying, it's like the most important thing is the reaction in the audience and what.
There's just a quick one. There's the current World Slam Poetry Champion is a guy from Canada. He's born in Nigeria, but he lives in Canada now, and he did a poem at this year's finals where he basically took the alphabet and he killed it. Yeah. He went from A to Z, and I'm thinking, yo, it's crazy. And then he goes from Z back to A, and I'm like, no. and then he goes A B B C C, and I'm like, this, immediately when you see a piece like that, you're like,
I'm done. I'm done.
That's it.
But that's the thing, when you can make it seamlessly, that all the hours you spend on something, and then you can make it flawless, flowing naturally on stage. That's when you really struck gold, because you know that's what's gonna make you a world champion, I suppose.
And it's also I really like that kind of writing myself, like writing poems where every word starts with the same sound or the same letter, and like this very advanced rhyme things that no one really you can see it if you watch it, if you're reading the poem on a paper, but you don't really hear it. And I really love to do that myself, just to know that I am really smart. No one knows it, but I.
I've got a question. I have always felt that. Do you guys ever feel like sometimes there are certain golden nuggets in your work that sort of are lost and only you know about them, and you know, even though every part of you wants to explain to the audience what you've just did, do you ever feel that?
Every time I read it, there's at least one point where I think, should I break character? And just tell people, you just missed something.
You didn't get the reaction you wanted. The response you
and
expected.
sometimes I even have done that. And
I said
it's so bad.
Have a cue card with good bit coming up.
Applause.
I know, definitely. Yeah. But I think maybe that question grew out of sort of wondering whether people don't class spoken word as a true art form in that sense. You know, the questions of concepts and subtext, which are there in print poem, aren't often discussed in spoken word. Maybe because it's often quite fast flowing, and you do miss those nuggets. You don't always see those. How do you feel about that? Because I come from the visual arts world, where it's natural to talk about these subjects.
Well, this sort of conversation, I think, is, you know, will prove essential for the growing of the art form, especially in Sweden. Like, if we are to take this to the next level, we need to have these sort of conversations and discussions about, you know, poets amongst themselves, but also you know, outwards to an audience. That the more you dissect and talk about, analyze what you do, the more, you know, firmer foundation we will have to stand on when you know.
And I also think that it is a problem when it's just the poetry slam and the competition, because then you just have 3 minutes and you can do your poem, but you can't really do a big concept of it. Like now I'm just reading poems that start with this letter and ends in this way, or I'm making this like.
It's very fast paced, and you know, you have to have a lot of wits and punches, and like if next poem and next poet.
And I think it's a really big difference if you perform for 1 hour. Even though I'm just reading poems for 1 hour, I can still make the connect poems to each other, and then you can I start with this one and I end with this one, and it's
you can really build a subject so people can have time to digest.
I've got a fine art background as well, and one of the challenges and I was just downright uncomfortable with it was the fact that, you know, fine artists, well, back in art school, we seemed to be more focused on creating art that is accessible to the academic and the general public, which might not necessarily have the same kind of information and theory that the academics have, sort of lose, you know, a lot of the meaning in an artwork, you know. And it begged the question, then who are we creating art for? Is it for the masses, or is it just for, you know, like you walk into a gallery and there's this huge piece of canvas and there's nothing on it, and you know, an artist comes and they're like, the concept behind this is negative spaces, this, that, blah blah blah, and the layman on the street is like, but I just see a blank thing there, you know. And with poetry as well, I think there's a real danger in creating poems for poets, and especially if you want to grow movement, because if you're looking to grow the poetry movement, then poetry needs to be accessible, both intellectually and, you know, in terms of where these sessions are held for people.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point actually, because until people start discussing it properly, the problem is if you take that point on face value, like we need a bigger audience, it sort of seems like we need to bend our poetry to suit taste, and that's not the point. It's just you need to be more considerate of who you're trying to reach. It doesn't mean you have to write simpler poetry.
No.
It just means you need to find a different language.
And I also think that, and I think that's important, that you're able to be both. You can be really intellectual and talk to the academics, and you can still do it in a way so everyone can.
And that's where creativity comes in.
Yeah. And because I've often likened the poetry scene in London to like the sort of pedigree dog showing scene. You know, it's lots of people with lots of dogs showing their dogs to lots of people with lots of dogs. Yeah. And if you go to a poetry gig, it's just people with lots of poems reading to people with lots of poems. Yeah. And there isn't really anyone from outside of that. And you know, it's definitely. And I think that's just what I was meaning. Really, is this whole idea of concept and subtext and really questioning what you do. Because until you do that, until you really look at yourself and why you're doing something, you can't really communicate with, or not well enough to draw in a wider audience. You know? And I think that's what fine artists have been doing, the most successful ones, what they've been forced into doing, and designers and graphic designers have been forced to interact with the public, you know, but find really creative ways of doing that.
A way of doing that in Stockholm is that we've been doing a collaboration with the Royal Theatre here in Stockholm, the Dramatic Royal Theatre, whatever, and it's been sort of like a way of finding a new generation of audiences, finding that really castle of a cultural institution, the Royal Theatre, a new audience in there, and a way of doing that was implementing spoken word nights in those really fine salons, you know.
Yeah.
So it's
okay. So next, I'd really like to ask you all about this idea of social commentary in spoken word, and should there be more, or is it unfair that there's perhaps a bigger expectation on spoken word than there is on other art forms to be more socially active?
I think it's unfair.
towards who?
I honestly think, it's a little bit unfair because it's art. You don't tell a musician what to sing, so why are you gonna tell a poet what to say, type of thing. I believe that we spoke about this when we met earlier in the week, that there is enough poets going around, there's enough poems going around. It's just a matter of, I believe, the individual finding their niche and being the best they can be at that.
And I also think because like it's an easy art to write a spoken word piece. So if you want to say something political, it's easy to do it because you don't need anything else than yourself.
Yeah.
So because I can also feel that sometimes when you're on a poetry slam, it's like everyone is saying very political things in almost the same way, and they say really smart things, but I can be like this. But where's the poetry? I want this I want the love poems and the nature poems and all that. But I think it's like
actually, I hadn't actually considered it like that before. That's quite an interesting point in that. Yes, as soon as it could happen that as soon as you choose a particular message, it would be very easy then to forget about trying to write properly. I say properly, but in a skilled way, or following a particular form. Yeah, it's quite interesting actually.
But all spoken word poets are in a way activists. I mean, in the field of in the body of the work. But I myself is very much aware of being a white male person and the space I take on stage and the time I take. Am I taking it from someone else? Am I, what am I saying? how am I using the time I have on stage? And it may be not as much shines through in every poem in a political way, but I am in other ways with my poetry breaking a norm, or trying to make a change. If it's finding another way for people to reevaluate their own position, or
I think I've also often considered
privilege.
that there are far more spoken word poets doing making social comments than people realise a lot, but just because they're not standing up and shouting about politics or
you can find a more subtle way of doing
people
it.
People talk about mental health issues, they talk about gender roles, masculinity, femininity, and all of these things in between, which are all vitally important to society working, but quite often it's missed because people don't listen, or the poem moves too quickly, or they don't understand the subtext, or so it takes in all the things we've been talking about now. But I do think spoken word artists are much more socially aware than they're given credit for.
And then it's also like you need to be aware of that the moment you're standing on the stage, you are political in some way, because you are taking, as you said, like you are taking this place and you are taking it for someone else, of course. And you're standing there and your body is political. Always.
And even if you're getting up and reading the alphabet forwards and backwards and doubling it up, you're making you're probably making even a stronger comment now about what it is to be an artist or creative.
But I also think, because I think it's interesting, because when I started doing poetry slams in Sweden, there was like almost no female poets.
Okay.
And I was one of the few female poets in Sweden.
Yeah.
And then I was very political.
Sure.
Always, I was booked as the female poet and did all those gigs. And nowadays there are like more good female poets than male poets in Sweden. So I'm not political anymore on stage, and it's really interesting to have this like.
So you can find that shift, and your role can change.
And then in some way I'm freer, and in another way I am not. It's very it's strange in some way, because then also before I didn't need to write political poems to be political. Now I need to write political poems to be political in some way.
But I suppose when you're just by. Yeah, that's interesting. So I've been discussing with people in London, and by far the best or most obvious social commentary comes from the LGBT community. But that's a good point. It may just be when a particular type of performer is in the minority, they're automatically considered an activist or something because they're standing up alone. Once that voice becomes a majority, like the young white heterosexual voice, or in London even the young black guys standing up, that there isn't that sort of. Had it been the early 80s, they would have been seen as political or activists. But now, when balances shift and people become majority and no longer minority, so that's an interesting point as well. Even without trying it, you can be political.
When you are represented for something, then you get.
Sure.
But I think also there's that, maybe this question of social commentary comes from really perhaps older generations, because they've certainly poets that I know that begun in the late 70s, early 80s, and read poetry before punk gigs and stuff, and it's quite a hard time to start, and everything was political because you literally had to get up and shout, and it might just be resentment's too harsh a word, I don't mean it like that, but maybe they just would wish that voice had continued, because they maybe saw a power in spoken word which is being neglected now, or
But I don't really think we had that kind of poets in Sweden.
No, so maybe that's why it's a different issue.
We had spoken word poets in Sweden in the 80s, but it was not really political in that way. So I think it's much, much more political now than it was in the...
That's really why I brought up the sort of brief background of London poetry there, because I think my questioning is, that's where that question's coming from. So it might not seem as relevant for you guys in that, you perhaps this isn't a question within the scene like it is in London. Okay, so I'd like to talk now about performance style, and if there are any particular things that you feel are important. So the 2 points I'm going to bring up are how theatrical should spoken word be allowed to become, and also just a quick one, reading from page or memory. Is it an issue for you when you see other performers do it? Your preferences, but also how you feel about other people's styles. But maybe start with Olivia.
Yeah, I can. If it's good, it's good. I would say it doesn't matter.
In terms of reading from the page or from memory.
And also in terms of how theatrical it could be. It's like if it's a good poem, it's a good poem,
Sure.
or if it's a good performance, it's a good performance. And then I don't really like this actor kind of way of reading poems, as a lot of spoken word artists don't. But you can do. I really think it's important that the spoken word should be that open, that you don't really have like, okay, here's the limit of how much theater it could get. You can talk with 10 voices if you like to, and it can still be a poem. And you can have like just paper reading from it, and it can be great. And you can also read from papers, and it's really, really bad.
Yeah.
And you can learn your poem by heart. And
Okay.
I love reciting from memory. It's very difficult for me to grasp the idea of reading from paper because I need my body so much, you know. But with the paper thing, there are people who are able to do it brilliantly. Two performances I've seen come to mind. One, Sean Williams gets on stage and he's got the scroll and he just reels it out on the stage and he begins to read it. You know, I thought that was brilliant. And then this other guy, he walks up. He's like, "Yeah, I wrote this poem." Sorry, I love speaking in accents. So every word in my head is a character. Yes. So there's this South African political accent. When you're talking, you must talk like this, comrade. You don't twang. You don't talk like an American white boy. This is how you talk. You know? So this guy walks on stage like, "Yeah, I've just written this poem, and I think I like it." And then he stands there with a piece of paper. He reads the whole thing, and then at the end he tears it up and throws it away. And I'm like, you know, so different ways in which people use their mediums. For me, that is the interesting part. Just the actual reading on its own is like, can't you get it in your head? I don't know. Mainly because I come from a place where poetry is so raw and it's just, But that's the reading part. And then, I mean, the other part is it can be anything. Spoken word, I feel like just take the chains off, take the limits off, and just let it fly and see where it's going to go. You know, I don't think anything can ever be too much. And I say this very carefully. I don't think anything can ever be too much, but yeah.
But I also think that if it becomes too much theater, people will call it theater and not spoken word. So it's
I think that's what I mean. Are we in,
it's a fine line.
Are people in danger of killing
the poems?
Kill the poems. Actually, I'm in favour of killing the poems, but that's another subject.
Yeah. Shoot the DJ and kill the poems.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I've up until recently, I've been having a really hard time memorizing poems or text, but I'm getting there, and I've been using paper or like a book or something that I've been writing it down in. So I've been accustomed to using paper in a way that feels natural on stage, and I think I've been successful with it. But as I'm moving, you know, on and growing as an artist, I do want to becoming better at, you know, being free on stage with no.
What do you want to do with your hands?
I don't know if I don't want to do more with my hands, because I have this wave thing, you know. It's a wave thing. You know, with my left hand, I'm always like waving it in sort of spastic rhythms. But I feel I would be more free in my mind if I were to like put the paper down, because we talked about this earlier this week, that you feel like you have a shield, like when it's a safety net.
There are definitely some performers that use it as a barrier between you and the audience.
And I want to rid myself of that, and I have been, you know, getting better at it.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed with people that can hold a paper like this for a whole poem without shaking their head. Because I get really like, even though I'm not really nervous, I start to shake in my body.
I shake constantly all the time, and
because that just it takes away the attention from.
And you can hear the sound.
And you feel someone's nervousness. Like,
but when you can see someone just holding it completely still, I get so impressed. And it's also like this intention thing with when you see someone reading from a still paper. I really like that kind of performance because it gets like, it's a little bit more.
It's intense.
I quite like, and this is not going to work on a audio recording, no one's going to understand this, but
we'll describe what you're doing. David's now taking his clothes off.
Christ, what's wrong with that? I like doing that slam thing where you, it might be an English thing, but they hold a piece of paper out, and as they chat to the audience, they take it from one hand, pass it under the mic stand, and hold it up again. That's the only reason to hold a piece of paper for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've done it a couple of times, sort of tongue in cheek. I love it. It's just this thing that they it's sort of as they're. It's sort of their, this whole thing, this is nothing. This pipe lasts. This took, I don't know, 2 minutes to, I don't know. I'll read it to you anyway. I'm embarrassed almost to read it to you. It's that kind of thing.
But I like paper, as you said, Tswi, and in a way, if you use it, and you, Olivia, touched as well, if you use it as a prop, if you use it in a creative way,
I agree,
it becomes, it heightens your poem if you can find a way.
I quite like the idea of reciting a poem from a piece of paper and then turning it around and the paper's blank.
Oh, that's
that's that kind of thing. That's because it becomes more. I mean, you've got to be careful. It doesn't seem really pretentious, but stuff like that, or
it would be fun.
I really that whole idea of ripping stuff up.
I like that.
And just dropping the papers, so they fly away.
I've seen someone who came out, or I don't know if I've seen. This is a funny thing, how memory changes things. I don't know if I've seen it or I've thought of it and I wanted to do it, but here I give it away now. Of like having one word written on each paper and then come out with like a whole, like a stack, and then just like, this do a Dylan thing, but with like one word printed on each paper. So it's like at the end of the thing, it's like papers everywhere.
I have almost done that.
Right.
Maybe it's because I did it like once, but it was not one word. It was like 2 sentences. And I was throwing away a lot of papers. On the audience.
I've done it once with a visual cue. I've gone up on stage and I didn't know which poem to read. So I had 2 poems on paper, and I said they're both about the idea of love but not quite reaching that love. One is set on a dance floor and one is set up a hill. Which do you want? And they chose one, but I know both of them. I know from memory, so I don't know why I did it. I don't need the paper. It's just I wanted to show them something.
But the illusion of choice.
Once they chose, I dropped both pieces of paper and then read the poem from memory.
But do you like that? Like the audience choosing, because I feel like half of the audience is getting disappointed because you read the poem that they don't want you.
Well, no, I knew it was a bit. I knew which one I was going to read. Which one I chose.
But on the flip side, the good thing about that is that you're getting the audience involved.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that's
true.
I actually, because the girl running that night, hello Kyla, if you're listening.
Hi Kyla.
Everyone say hey Kyla. She runs a fantastic night called Union in Putney, but it's in Putney, it's miles away. Anyway, she'd seen me read the other poem that I wasn't going to do, so I was waiting for her to choose it. So it was all part of. I hadn't really planned it; just sort of happened. But it's that sort of element of some improvisation. Although I was going to read the poem sort of as the text was written.
This is all very interesting because I mean, a lot of people actually. A piece of paper is considered just to be like a medium where you put your words down. But like listening to you guys talk now, I'm actually getting like a whole lot of ideas of. Like, what can we do to extend the piece of paper or to use it in some way? And I think that's a good challenge.
I think it's better to view it. I mean, this is going to sound really pretentious. If you view it more as a vehicle to take your ideas somewhere, it becomes. It's not then just. Some people describe it as a canvas, but even the canvas is too rigid. The canvas still just goes on the. Traditionally, just still just goes on the wall, or you still view it in that.
I mean, and the paper on stage is a callback as well to what we were discussing earlier. Are you viewing yourself as a writer or as a performer? Because if you take the writing on stage, it's sort of like as you said,
I think that's
combines.
maybe what it was, almost subconscious. It was me, right, this is my writing, you can have either one.
Yeah.
But once the performing starts, that's not what you get. You don't get the paper, you get me, but this is where it comes from.
Yeah, that's interesting. I will think, because I have always been it has been really easy for me to learn the poems by heart. I just remember text and nothing else. Completely nothing else. So for me it has been very natural to read without papers. And also I am writing most of my poems. I am writing like just speaking them, and then I write them down, so I know them by heart when I write them down.
Yeah.
So it feels really... I get some things to think about.
Okay, now the sunny subject of depression. And this idea that performing or writing or using poetry as therapy is obviously a very common thing. I suppose just want to ask you three whether any of you use your poetry for that reason, and if you do, does it work? Does it help? Niklas?
I'm moved by someone who goes up on stage and reads something that you can feel they've been through some shit, you know, and it transcends into their poetry or in their performance. And then I don't really much care if they are using it as a way of making themselves feel better, because that's how I view what I write as well. If I take something that was really hard and I transform it into a poem, and then every time I read it I feel a little better, but then I know also someone in the audience also might have feel that identification in what I'm doing or saying, and then they get that same like soothing feeling and calm and like, fuck man, I've been through that, I know what you're doing or what you've been through. I don't really mind if it's therapeutic for them or not. I use humor as a way of taking up on really difficult topics. Like one of my most fun poems is about me getting the shit kicked out of me in Gothenburg. Right. I got they beat me to a pulp, these couple of guys. And then I try to visualize whatever they saw in me that could have provoked them to the point where they need to feel that they kicked me in the face. And it's a really fun poem. It's like it's a ride. People are laughing, I'm laughing, and that's a sort of therapy, but not in a sticky way. I'm not enforcing I guess that's my answer.
I actually started writing poetry plus minus 15 years ago because I was in an extremely emotionally charged place. So I think for me it started as therapy, and I was really upset, and that in itself not only sort of shows you that the thing is, people are emotional beings, and people want to connect. The most important thing about any performance is to connect, because if you can connect, then you are able to either help people or to destroy people. You can never be influenced by somebody you don't connect with, and I think as poets that is sort of our goal when we do what we do. So connecting. And the thing is, there's a lot of doom and gloom in the world. People are broken, people are sad, people are torn, people are scarred, and sometimes they don't have the capacity to express that, and you might just be the one person who's like, that's what I've been feeling, I never had words for it. Thank you. So it's that's the beauty of it, is that it can be so much and nothing at the same time.
And it's also, I think it's so much about like the therapy in writing. I do that a lot. I write, but it's just for myself, and then I sometimes fool myself into writing things that is very, very personal, and then I write it in a way that it's like it has nothing to do with me, and then I can use it for a performance in some way. And I think that's like trying to be as honest as possible on stage, but still never telling the truth about things or people. And I always, when I write about people, I used to change gender on them, for example, or age or something, that just not to be the person standing on stage and talking about someone or something that the people around me can't talk about, because it's me standing on stage, and then I have the power of the story in some way.
Actually, that's two really interesting points. One that Niklas brought up, and yourself, Olivia, this idea that it may begin as therapy for yourself, but how important it is that you might connect with someone in the audience, and it may become therapy for them because they see someone standing up and being brave enough to talk about it. So there's that side of things. But also this idea of honesty within poetry. I find it very, very odd that people demand complete honesty for poetry.
All poets are liars. Can we settle this for once and all?
But I would say, but you need to talk. You need to see what is the truth.
No, that's what exactly what I'm saying. There's that. Some of the most beautiful things I've seen on stage are some things where they quite clearly something has actually happened to this person.
Yeah.
But then it's just been delivered in an arc, which, you know, because most life stories wouldn't fit on stage. You know, you couldn't just this. When I tried it, it doesn't work. I mean, it felt all right for me, but the audience didn't like it. But no, I think it's a really important part that it's an important point. Why are these demands made of us to be honest all the time, completely honest about everything? And it's, I don't know, I mean, maybe that doesn't actually exist, but
I see.
There is a pressure there, isn't there? I think. Do you feel that?
Yeah, but sorry.
But I just think that if you're in the audience and you see something, you want it to be true.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it feels true, and then if it's not true, you are fooled by the poet.
Yeah, but that's the thing, isn't it? If it feels authentic, if it feels like it's happened to someone, then it becomes a sort of truth. And then that's your job is done. That's it. Because you made that person feel whatever it needed to feel, or, you know, find that key to whatever they are trying to unlock. Or, you know, and it doesn't really matter what is fabricated and what is, you know, the truth behind it, because it all blends into
shouldn't
this.
matter, at least.
Yeah,
but it does seem to matter.
Yeah.
And I wonder how that can best be, because I think sometimes it distracts from the power of the poetry itself, because people dismiss things because once they find out they're not true, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I have a piece which is based on my character is sleeping with a girl. It turns out that she refuses to kiss me. But the twist is that I'm a young guy and I'm upset that I don't have an intimacy. So an issue that would usually be considered as something girls will worry about, not having an intimacy. I'm a young guy on stage, questioning whether I have this closeness with someone and longing for it.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, I'm asked, did that girl ever kiss you? And I'm like, well, she didn't exist first. It's made up. And then that disappointment, and then my piece was somehow no longer valid because it was based on a fabrication.
Okay.
But those feelings are still true. You know, the points are still valid.
That's not fair. That's another thing that's not fair. Because if you pick up a novel, you can let it paint you with all the hues that it has for you. And why should then somebody who's saying something out loud on a stage be held to a different standard? You know, I think if it's all art, then just take it as it comes.
Yeah. I suppose it might just be something very basic, and that this is the only art form where you see the whites of their eyes. And if you see the whites of their eyes, they shouldn't lie to you. It might be just that basic human expectation.
It houses in a person, and then you expect that person to be honest with you, because, you know, nobody likes
because I don't think anyone would question a dishonest printed poem in the same way they would a spoken word.
No, you don't seek out the author and want to validate.
Excuse me.
Did this really happen to you?
Well, unless they write about you.
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing is, I think it's a difference also for myself, because a friend of mine, I know he had said, like, false things before he read the poem. And it's just me knowing it, or I think some more people knowing it. But then it's like I'm totally fine with the poem, but the story before the poem, when it's not true, I'm like, yeah, but you don't need to, you don't need to say that.
Yeah.
It's also because then I get a little bit more sensitive when you're not reading the poem, you're just talking,
Sure.
and that's. I don't know. It's just that's my line, I guess.
No, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of scope to play around with this idea of truth or dishonesty, but it's maybe something to go into another time because it's a deep subject. But I just want to say thank you very much to Olivia Bergdahl and Tswi Hlakotsa. I swore, I got right to the end. And I just said fuck.
Yes.
Those who know me will know how difficult that was. Niklas Mesaros. Again, their names will be written more clearly than I can ever enunciate them on the website. This was for Lunar Poetry, and I just want to also thank Drömfakulteten, which is the Dream Faculty in Sweden, and they've let us use their fantastic studio space to make this recording. Thank you to Katja Lindberg and Ophelia Jarl Ortega.
Thank you for having us.
No, it was great. I've really enjoyed it, and hopefully you will come to London and say hello to the people whose ears are taking in these sounds.
Definitely.
All of them.
All of them. Every single line up. There's been about 3 of them, so. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Föreställ dig att du har vikt hörnen passerat kändes självklar. Lika självklart som att det finns ett avstånd. Lika stort som saknar. Det är lika långt som tiden det tar för ett eko att studsa tillbaka. Och jag har räknat stegen till din port. Jag har vägt varje andetag som tyngs ner av ditt namn. Den här stan är tillräckligt taktil. Det är minnen i repris längs med varje hållplats och det finns gator som fortfarande är våra. Och där revbenen möts i mitten finns en grop. Och jag minns, vi brukade titta på videoklipp av sjöhästar på internet. Alla hade bakgrundsmusik av Enya. Och de flöt omkring i slow motion och när de parade sig så krokade de ihop sina svansar, men ironiskt nog så kunde de inte längre hålla sig flytande så de sjönk tillsammans mot botten. Och vi skrek åt skärmen: men släpp taget då, era idioter, det är inte värt det. Jag vet nu att vi egentligen skrek åt varandra. Som med ett stryptag om varandras hals viskar vi samtidigt: jag släpper om du släpper. Men vi kan börja om. För det finns ett avstånd lika stort som saknad, och det är lika långt som tiden det tar för ett eko att studsa tillbaka. Och jag har räknat stegen till din port. Och det finns gator som fortfarande är våra. Och där revbenen möts i mitten finns en grop.